Escape to Hampstead is the title of the chapter in Tom Pocock's wonderful book, London Walks, which I've used a few times. So that's what I'm doing today. I've escaped to Hampstead. I'm not sure what I'm escaping from, if I was honest with you, but I do know I'm in the land of poets up here. And bizarrely for me, as a man who famously starts his walks late, I'm too early for the Keats Museum, so I'm going to start at the place that people did escape to during the plague. That's where we'll start our walk. These willows here mark the start of Willow Road. And of course, Hampstead is a place of wells and springs, the sources of some of our lost rivers. Taking me by surprise slightly here, number 2 Willow Road, it's quite a modern block of flats, is a National Trust property. I'm not sure if I'm curious enough to pay 12 quid to go in, but you never know. I shall look that up, and there should be some text on the screen to explain why this, what's this, 60s, 70s block is a National Trust property. There is so much to talk about in Hampstead, so much to cover, and I will cover as much of it as I can in this video. One thing I'm not planning on covering is that over there, the heath. You might think, what? How can you make a video in Hampstead and not talk about the heath? Well, who knows, I may end up on the heath, but I'm going to use a combination of 3 books that I've got, well, primarily 2, Tom Pocock's London Walks, and John Whitich again, Discovering London's Villages. I've also got another book in the Discovering series, Discovering Country Walks in North London, and that is just around the heath, so I'd probably do that as a separate video. But there's so much around these streets that lead up to the heath and up to the Spaniards Inn and then back down the hill. And of course we've got Keats, we've obviously got Blake. They don't really like Blake very much in those books. He gets a little bit of a sniff. Anyway, let's crack on. And these 2 books will be embellished with my own stuff that's just babbling around in my brain. So this fork in the road takes us to Christchurch Hill, and that's where we're going to go in search of the hotel that gave Hampstead its initial fame. And we have one of the fantastic Victorian cattle troughs at the bottom of the hill here. Hampstead is first mentioned in a charter of King Edgar in 957 and is shortly after given by Ethelred to Westminster Abbey, and it remained in their possession until the dissolution of the Abbey in 1550. The etymology is a lot simpler than Fulham, where we were the other week. It's just simply meant to mean a homestead. Hampstead, a homestead. At some point a P was added and no one's quite sure why or when. And here's the wonderful Wells Tavern. Great place to stop for a pint on your way to the heath, or from your way from the heath. This is the site of an 18th century spa, which started the rise of Hampstead's fame as a resort for wealthy Londoners to escape the plagues of the city. And indeed it was slightly before that, during the Great Plague of London, that the wealthy merchants decamped to Hampstead, amongst other places like Highbury, on high ground. It's only 4 miles from London, and they were commuting to London. Over there we have a plaque for Margaret Llewellyn Davis, who was the founder of the Women's Cooperative Movement. And Hampstead has that kind of reputation, doesn't it, for left-wing intellectuals, and there's an expression of a Hampstead Bolshevik as a kind of put down. I think those days are long gone. I think that's a reputation that comes from probably the late Victorian period and early 20th century, maybe surviving as late as the 50s. But. And here we have a plaque to Mary Stopes, the social reformer and the pioneer of the family planning movement. I am ever so slightly regretting not just filming outside the Keats Museum now, the Keats House, because It's hilly. That means I've got to go down the hill. I've got nothing else to film down there. I've just got to come straight back up again. But this is how dedicated I am to these videos. And I know that if I had done that, one person would say, why didn't you wait and go in? And I'd be thinking, you're right, I should have done. Now I'm thinking the opposite. So this glorious old pile here on New End Square isn't in any three of my books. So look that up. But there are so many grand houses in Hampstead. So it's actually Burgh House, one of Hampstead's oldest houses, built in 1704 for a family of city haberdashers. The name comes from a vicar who lived here in the 19th century. And it's also where Rudyard Kipling's daughter lived in the 1930s. She moved out in 1937, and Kipling was a frequent visitor. It's free to enter and you can go around, and it's really, really wonderful. There's a lovely cafe in the basement and tables in the shaded gardens. It's a real delight, and the staff are lovely in there. It's now a gallery and an event space. The Well Walk Theatre down there. This is an interesting looking place, isn't it? I don't remember that, so I wonder if that's a new addition. And inevitably it has a cafe, which I'm sure is also delightful. So we'll turn into Flask Walk. And here we have Flask House, which was built in 1734. And here we have the wonderful red brick, the Wells and Camden with a P, Baths and Wash Houses, 1888. And I feel that if Tom Pocock or John Whitich were writing their guidebook of a walk around Hampstead today, they would include these vintage telephone boxes, rare beasts in the urban landscape. These little nooks and alleyways are one of the real delights of Hampstead, and just wandering around here really like a flaneur. Here we have Flask Cottages, and we're going to turn up this alleyway just up here, and this is called Bode's Mews. This is New End. Again, you can see a lot of these houses are Victorian or Georgian. And we'll go into Streatley Place to Mansfield Place. This impressive chimney here will need to be looked up at the end of the walk. And we've got this wonderful alleyway here behind New End Primary School. Again with the street lamps that would be very evocative at night time. This is Mansfield Place. Up these old stone steps here. The sound of the drilling coming from the endless renovations that you get in Hampstead. These fine houses here at the end of Streatley Place date from 1720. The plaque says London Assurance 1720. So we're basically going in a little bit of a loop down Back Lane to Flask Walk, the other end of Flask Walk. And the little cottages and courtyards and alleyways, just the real treasures of Hampstead. This is why it's a great example of village London, probably the most famous example of village London, really. In Tom Pocock's time, the Flask pub here on the left was noted for its mural of a Victorian soldier courting a nursery maid. He calls this section of Flask Walk the very essence of Hampstead, and lists a variety of shops, a restaurant selling game, a health food shop selling nut rissoles, two butchers, a second-hand bookshop, an antique shop, and all the other lot of natty, sort of slightly eccentric but also slightly old world things that Hampstead's sort of associated with. Now, it's not that different today. We've got florists, we've got a tailors, we've got butchers, we've got small restaurants, we've got a gelateria, antiques. So, you know, recognisable from 50 years ago. And now we come out onto Hampstead High Street for the first time today. And I'm considering ending the walk down at the Keats House and Keats Museum. It'll almost certainly be shut when we go there, won't it? But I'm not going back down the hill and coming back up now. Hampstead High Street here. Over on the right you have the Coffee Cup, which is one of my favourite coffee places in Hampstead. It's where I used to meet Nick Papadimitra and we would plot our walks. But we're going to turn right out of Flask Walk up the hill towards some very notable pubs and some very old houses. Hampstead Tube Station here is the deepest on the underground network, being 192 feet beneath the ground, which makes a lot of sense when you consider that we're making our way up to the highest point in London. Controversially, we're going to turn into Heath Street briefly rather than go up Holly Hill. I think we'll come back down Holly Hill on our way to the Keats House, probably in the rain. The reason I wanted to turn into Heath Street was so we could approach the wonderful Hollybush pub from this set of stone steps, which is a very Hampstead feature here. This is for me one of the classic images of Hampstead. Looking back. And from the top of Holly Mount you get this wonderful view back across London. And this for me is how you want to approach the Hollybush pub, particularly on a winter's night. And another lovely set of stone steps here. In Holly Mount there was once a chapel where it's said that John Wesley once preached. And the Hollybush pub dates from the late 17th century. I think it's probably been done up a little bit since then, but it's where the painter Romney lodged whilst he was recovering from a tragic affair with Emma Hamilton, and she became the subject of a lot of his more famous paintings. I'm going to confess I hadn't heard of him before, but I should be looking at him now. And the Hollybush is in a lot of people's list of top 10 London pubs. Would I put it there? I haven't been in there for a pint for a few years now actually, and it's not even midday yet. It's about 11:55, which is too early for me to get on the beer, I'm afraid. Particularly if you want this video to ever get finished. So we turn right into Hampstead Grove, and up there we have the National Trusted Fenton House, one of the oldest houses in Hampstead. So Fenton House sits behind these gilded gates and was built in 1693. They say the architect was unknown at the time of John Whittich's writing, which is roughly contemporary with the Tom Pocock book, and it was suggested that perhaps, just perhaps, Sir Christopher Wren had been the architect. And the steps of Fenton House give us a wonderful view of George Romney's house. Here, this weatherboard house that he built behind the Hollybush pub. And Tom Pocock mentions that it was when he was recovering from an affair with Emma Hamilton, and it was here in this house that he did multiple paintings using her as the subject. The house being built in 1693. And basically next to Fenton House is Bolton House here, which was the home of the Scottish poetess and dramatist Joanna Brill, said to be the finest female writer of her age. She lived from 1760s to 1850. I think it's 1762 to 1851. Sir Walter Scott used to visit her here and mentioned the house. One of the actresses that performed in her plays was Sarah Siddons, and that name I know we've talked about in a previous video, but which one was it? Hampstead is well known as a place of these famous figures that we're touching on today, but also anyone that's spent any time in Hampstead will know Hampstead is also a place of characters and eccentrics. And if you will have your own ones. They're the well-known ones. There's the guy who ended up being the subject of a film, I think with Diane Keaton in it, a guy who lived on the heath, then he lived in her garden. Rainbow George was my favourite Hampstead character. Some of you might remember he used to ring into LBC all the time. He loved ringing into talk radio every night, George from Hampstead. And I interviewed George up here a couple of times. He was a neighbour of Peter Cook, the famous comedian Peter Cook was George's neighbour, and Peter Cook liked to drink, to put it mildly, and they would go drinking together, go back to George's. George's would put on his tape recorder and record their conversations. They became a legendary thing because obviously Peter Cook was saying some quite, risque things. He was the son of a famous, he was son of a notable Hatton Garden diamond trader. George has got many, many stories. This house here at 28 Hampstead Grove has a plaque to George du Maurier, who lived here from 1874 to 1895. And here we have a delightful Hampstead folly. It was the home of an Admiral of George IV, so we'll deduct the dates from that. And he retired here and built a quarterdeck on the roof, which on feast days he would raise the white ensign and fire a cannon from there. Surely not with a cannonball in it, but quite a character. The plaque though is to Gilbert Scott, living here from 1811 to 1878. One of the books I've got though records that he actually found it too cold, couldn't spend the winters here and moved back to London eventually. John Constable used the Admiral's house as the subject for his painting, The Romantic House in Hampstead. And next to the Admiral's house stands Grove Lodge, home to John Galsworthy between 1918 and 1933. Looking at the Google map, there is an observatory up here on top of what I would say is almost certainly a reservoir. Of course, Hampstead would be a perfect place for an observatory because we're approaching the highest point in London. And here we have Whitestone Pond. The little ramp here feels to be inviting us to once again sail boats on the pond as it was once popular for, or go paddling in there, which was so popular at one point it was known as Hampstead on Sea. Originally only filled by dew and rainwater. The flagpole on the far side, in one of my books says marks the highest point in London, and another mentions that it was the site of the Hampstead Beacon, which was here to warn of a possible invasion by the Spanish Armada, a thing that obviously, thankfully, never happened. Otherwise, well, this video would be in Spanish, wouldn't it? And this is one of those questions, isn't it? What is the highest point in London? This is 444 feet above sea level. Jack Straw's Castle is what people usually say rather than Whitestone Pond, because Jack Straw's Castle is more famous. You could be forgiven for expecting the highest point in London to have better views than this busy road. The views are actually over there, and we'll take a look at those after we've gone up to Jack Straw's Castle. And I take that time to look up whether the Pickwick Club was held at Jack Straw's Castle. So some of you are going to be late at this point going, I'm disgusted that you don't know that off the top of your head. But I don't know where the Pickwick Club used to meet. Do you? I bet you do. I know what you're like. So here is the Whitestone that gives Whitestone Pond its name. It's an old marker stone that gives the distances to St Giles being 4.5 miles and 29 yards from Holborn Bars. Charles Dickens would be absolutely disgusted because Jack Straw's Castle is a pub no more. And I'll put the date when it closed as a pub. I have a feeling that it's not that long ago, because it was one of Dickens's favourite days out. Apparently he would take a stroll across Hampstead Heath, have lunch at Jack Straw's Castle and probably a couple of pints, and then wander back to London. The name is either from Jack Straw, one of the leaders of the Peasants' Revolt of 1381, or Jane Straw, who was Jane Straw, whereas Jack Straw is famous. Take your pick if you like. There used to be horse races behind Jack Straw's castle until they became unruly and drew in the wrong sort of crowd. It's a shame it's not a pub anymore. I made the Pickwick link, the Pickwick Club link, because Samuel Pickwick, from the novel by Charles Dickens, The Pickwick Papers. It's got a longer title than that, hasn't it? But, and they would take adventures to far-flung places and report back. He did a paper on the source of the Hampstead ponds, but I don't think it was Whitestone Pond. It would have been the ponds where people go swimming and stuff now, I would say. But it's just starting to rain, so I have a choice. I either double back down through Hampstead and go to Church Row and then the Keats House, or I just cut across the Vale of Health here down to the Keats House and I miss Church Row. What do you think? We'll double back through Hampstead Village, picking up a few places I've missed. I can't miss out Church Row basically, and the tomb of John Constable. Too important. From this little patch of heath behind Whitestone Pond, where you get the great view looking west across London towards Cricklewood and beyond. We're going to head back towards Hampstead Village along Lower Terrace. And not far from the Admiral's house, we have the house where John Constable lived in the summers of 1821 and 1822. We turn into Frognall Rise and then down into the street simply called Frognall. None of this is in any of my books, by the way, so we're going rogue. This great alleyway here takes us to Mount Vernon and Holly Walk. So this house here in Mount Vernon is where Robert Louis Stevenson lived, author of Treasure Island and all that. How delightful is Holly Walk down here. I'm discovering lots of parts of Hampstead I've never been to before today, if I was honest. Hollyberry Lane. So this house here in Hollyberry Lane was home to Sir William Walton, who composed the coronation marches of 1937 and 1953. This is the watch house. And this area around here became a settlement for French emigres after the Napoleonic Wars. So here is a plaque here at the wonderful St Mary's Catholic Church, which was established by Abbé Jean-Jacques Morel, who was born in Normandy and came as a 26-year-old refugee from the French Revolution and moved to Hampstead in 1796 to care for the spiritual well-being of French exiles. The church was completed in 1816. In 1830, the eldest child of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette visited the Abbé to seek his help, and it's also where Charles de Gaulle worshipped during the Second World War. So we're going to continue our stroll down Holly Walk to Church Row. And here we have Hampstead Parish Church, Churchyard. A number of notable people were buried in here, among them John Constable, also Hugh Gaitskell, once leader of the Labour Party in the 1950s. It's quite overgrown now, isn't it? Someone carrying my surname there, a very common surname, Lois Rogers. Parish Church of St John, Hampstead. So it's in this churchyard here that Constable is buried. Let's go and find his tombstone if we can. Really beautiful churchyard, this. Really beautiful. So this is Constable's tomb here, along with other members of his family. Died in London, March the 31st, 1837. Church Row here has been called by various people the finest street in Hampstead, which is interesting. We've seen some glorious streets, haven't we? But it's, I think it's noted because it's a really good collection of 18th century houses, very grand houses. Church Row leads us into Heath Street, a very fine street. This is Oriel Place. Oriel Court. I'm pretty sure it's Perrin's Court here that Rainbow George lived in his flat. William IV pub on the High Street on the corner of Perrin's Lane. I used to drink in there once upon a time. And we're just walking a very short distance down the High Street before we turn to our final stop on this magnificent walking tour of Hampstead at Keats House. Old Brewery Mews. What brewery was it? My guess is going to be Watney's, but I shall have to look that up, won't I? So we'll turn into Downshire Hill, and that takes us to Keats Grove and Keats House and Museum, which is where the walk will end, just in time because it's just started to rain. Actually, pretty much bang on schedule. It's at this house here that the great romantic poet John Keats heard the nightingale that became the subject of his famous Ode to a Nightingale. This is where he composed 6 of his most famous odes. I think he moved here in 1818, not long before his untimely death at the age of 25 in Rome. He walked across the heath with Coleridge. He met Wordsworth whilst living here. He was a contemporary of Shelley and Byron. And Keats is one of our great romantic poets. Not really recognised as such in his lifetime. His recognition came years after his death. He died of TB in 1821. It's interesting to think of Keats strolling through the garden here, composing his ode to a Grecian urn, isn't it? And that concludes our walking tour, our wonderful walking tour of Hampstead, the village of Hampstead, but not Hampstead Heath. We'll do that in a different video. We'll do the ponds, Kenwood House, Spaniards Inn, all that kind of stuff. We'll do that a separate walk. I thought that'd be a really nice autumnal walk, or even a winter walk as well. Blake, I didn't mention Blake. I teased at the beginning, let me talk about it now. It's in Tom Pocock's book. According to Tom Pocock, William Blake really didn't like Hampstead. He declared a journey to Hampstead without due consideration would be mental rebellion against the Holy Spirit and only fit for a soldier of Satan to perform. Strong words. And so I come back to the very point where I started today 5 hours ago. Yeah, it's come up for 3 o'clock. I had breakfast down here, Euphorian Bakery, at about 9:45. So I don't know how I spent 5 hours, but that was amazing. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for joining me on that wonderful walk. Thank you to my fantastic supporters on Patreon and here, the YouTube members. And yeah, as I always like to say, I look forward to seeing you on the next walk, wherever that may be. And as you can imagine, I'm pretty hungry right now. I think I might go and Redemption Roasters, see what they can dish up. Have a great week. Take care.
It's over the meadow, over the stream. It's where I am going and where I have been. It's been a long day now. It's time for a beer. And now for home, of course I must steer. It's over